systems and tools. Because we watch a lot of organizations do this differently and effectively as well. And so what I'm going to share with you is, so how do you align these principles, systems, and tools? Bob talked in an earlier webinar about what these concepts were, what they were about. What are principles, what are systems, what are tools, and I'm going to talk more about how they link up, how they align. One of the first things that we see in organizations is this picture right here, and everyone always kind of goes, "What is that?" It's not a bunch of matchsticks. These are logs floating in a river, and they're causing these log jams. And this is what I call the log jam of tools. We have a lot of things going on in our plants. We've gone through this frenzy of tools through organizations and do continuous improvement. And you can call it Lean, TQM, Six Sigma, all these different great systems. But we always focus on the tools, and we really have never really unplugged that river. It's kind of clouded or jams us up to be really productive and efficient. And you can reflect on all the tools that you guys have. As you think about your own organization, what's is it our focus on the tools, and really what's the outcome that we're having to get this river to start flowing and to kind of unjam this river of all these tools. We really got to be able to think differently. And we hear Lean is a thinking way. It really is how we approach this concept and how we start learning how to align. And one of the biggest changes in the way we think is really about systemic thinking. And we always hear we're either left side or we're right side thinkers. And really what this means is we're either analyzers or we're synthesizers. Both make connections. Our brains love to connect. Actually, our brains don't like to think. They like to connect things. And so it's really understanding how we connect. Let me take out that excuse, by the way, of all those that are thinking, well, I'm a left side, and those that are saying, well, no, I'm right side. You're actually both. You just have one dominant side. It's really interesting what the body has. If you have two of them, you have a dominant. If you're left-handed or right-handed, you usually have a dominant hand. If you have kids that play soccer, they usually have a strong foot or a weak foot. For those who've been to optometrists, you probably have a strong eye or a weak eye. So, but it doesn't mean that for your right-handers, you don't do anything with your left hand. It doesn't lay there, dead. You still use it. So really, for your left side thinkers, you got to push yourself to think on the right side, and the same thing for the right side. Now, what this means when we start looking and be able to see the connection before we get into aligning tool systems and principles, you got to understand how we look at things. And the first one is we analyze, or we look into things. We take things apart. And so for those who have analyzed, you start up with these high-level concepts like flow, and then you start drilling down and you go, well, yeah, flow is about seeing the value stream. And then you drop down another level and you go, well, no, it's about seeing current state, future state, ideal state. And then you drop down another level and you go, well, it's looking at the current state, but really the current state is about, mapping out the processes and using Post-its and icons. And then we get frustrated because, well, you didn't use that icon right. The information flow looks like a lightning bolt. Man, we've just messed up the whole value stream map. And we get focused right there on the tactical. Those are usually the analyzers. They want to quantify and analyze everything. And let me take you over to the other side, the synthesizers. These are the ones that they take that Post-its and the icons and the processes, and they ask a question. They say, so how do these work together? What pattern do they have? And then they discover, oh, well, we're trying to look at the current state or the future state or the ideal state. Well, why would we do that? Oh, it's to see the value stream. Well, why would we do that? And they get down to the very end, which is, oh, we do that to see flow. And so the synthesizers kind of see the big picture, the holistic view, how things start connecting. They see patterns. What's really interesting is that you got to have both. You can't be a solely analyzer. You can't be a sole synthesizer. To synthesize, you got to be able to see all the parts. But the synthesizers see how they connect. And really the point of all this is where we get to at the very end. So you analyzers, you're really focusing on the how. It's all the tactical elements. While the synthesizers, They're looking at the why, why things are occurring. They get down to the concept. So it's really where they end up at the end of the day. And for those, on more of a more scientific study, have you ever seen the inside of a Rubik's Cube? You're an analyzer. That means you've torn it apart and you got completely frustrated with the Rubik's Cube and you couldn't take it anymore. So if you've seen the inside of a Rubik's Cube, you're probably an analyzer. For those who have completed a Rubik's Cube without taking it apart and putting it back together, you're probably a synthesizer. But you got to have both. And this is really what Shingo was teaching. When he taught about the philosophy and what the Shingo philosophy is really centered around, it's about principle systems and tools. And not just principle systems and tools, but it's how we think. And we start with the principles and we ask, so here's the principal behavior. And then Shingo would ask, so what systems enable that principle or that behavior? Now, what tools enable that system? And he got us to start thinking about the know why first, or to synthesize, see the big picture. Once we do that, now it's kind of easier to see, oh, this is how we're going to build it then. We're going to start with the tools and then integrate that into the systems to drive the behavior. Well, as you guys look at this, what the first problem we see is that most organizations start with tools. They start with tools and they try to integrate that into systems, and then we get the most common call here in the office is, so what's next? How do we get this into our culture? We're not slackers. We're doing the tools. We're doing the systems, but we can't get it into our culture. And we see very immediately they understand the how, the know-how, but not the know why they're doing it. And really, this makes sense, when we take a trivial example, and here's how we connect these in a very simplistic way. For those who've ever built anything, construction, guys, we love tools. This is why they built Home Depot and Lowe's. It's for us guys. We don't go out and borrow tools. We buy them. We have these collection of tools. I have a concrete mixer sitting in my garage. I had to sell this to my wife. The idea of bringing it in, she says, well, we'll go borrow one. I'm like, well, no way. That's why the Home Depot exists. And so I can own my own. And I had to sell this to my wife. Well, my friends will buy that or borrow it from me. Of course, all my friends, guess what they have in their garage? That's right, a concrete mixer, because we don't like to borrow. We love tools. Well, what would happen if I took all my tools and I showed up at a site to build a home, took every tool I owned and showed up? Well, we'd get there and we'd look at the blueprints and we go, oh my gosh, I brought all my tools, but we're going to build a brick home. I should have brought my brick tools. I brought my siding tools with me. So what dictated me bringing the right tools? It was the blueprint. It was what we were going to do with all the tools. And then we think, well, so who came up with the blueprint? Well, as soon as you get beyond the architectural engineer, who helped the architectural engineer discover what they wanted? And it was the customer. So if the customer wanted a house built out in the water, would that change the blueprints? Absolutely. It would change the blueprints. The blueprint then would dictate what tools we would bring. And so we get this concept, when we look at it something like this. Of course, we bring the right tools based on the blueprints or the system to deliver the value to the customer or the principal. What's interesting is when we go to business, we just focus on the tools and systems, but we kind of forget about these principles or how these link back together. This is what we're going to look at and discuss today. It's not so much the principles. Again, in the past webinar, Bob Miller, the executive director of Shingo Price, he talked about the principles and the power behind them. What I want to do is show, so how do these link together? And we're going to take you through this transformational model and show the connection that they have. So this first one is, we're going to start up, first thing is principles. And really what we want from principles is one thing, it's behavior. How do we get behavior out of principles? What's interesting is that the Shingo Prize, we're one of many thought leaders in principles. We don't hold the monopoly on principles. We learn from a lot of other organizations and people, from Deming, from Toyota, from Covey, from Womack. You can put Henry Ford in this, Duran, and they all talked about principles. And what's interesting, about halfway through their career, they really amplified principles and what they meant and how they affect organizations. So what the Shingo Prize has really done is taking those principles and put them into buckets. Shingo said, make this a lot easier on you. Put them in categorical buckets. And so what the Shingo Prize has done is said, okay, here we have a dimension, cultural enablers, which looks at people. These are principles that govern the consequence to people. Continuous improvement. These are principles about process. Focus on process, embrace scientific thinking, flow and pull value. These govern the consequences of process, alignment, and so forth, and results. So these are really the buckets of principles that we see. Now what we're going to do with those is, so here I have these guiding principles and I have supporting concepts. Now these are ones that, as we talked in prior discussions, principles are universal truths. They're timeless or self-evident. The trick here is you can disagree with them all you want. They still apply to you. Think about this. Let me use an example really quickly, like gravity. You can disagree with gravity all you want, but at the end of the day, it still applies to you. And it has a consequence. Well, the same thing with flow and pull value. Flow and pull, if you disagree with it, it still affects you. Think of your organization. If you're healthcare, what are you flowing? In aerospace, what are you flowing? If you cannot flow, what's the outcome? What's the consequence? And the ultimate consequence is you go out of business. So these principles govern your ability as a business. They govern those consequences. Now, for what we're going to discuss is, so how do we get, what do we want out of these principles? And really, it's to help us identify ideal behavior specifically. So what kind of helps us do this is, well, let's take a principle like embrace scientific thinking. And we're going to run with that one today. So let's take embrace scientific thinking, or what a lot of people call problem solving, systematic problem solving, like PDCA, DMAIC, but really embracing a methodology to solve problems. The supporting concepts kind of help us amplify what we'd expect to see there. So I've selected, standardized process, insist on direct observation, keep it simple. These will help me describe embrace scientific thinking. And what I want to do is describe a behavior. What would I expect to see? And this, believe it or not, is probably one of the hardest things that organizations do, is identify behavior. For those who have taken my class, or for those who have tried to identify behavior, you're probably getting a gut-wrenching feel inside the stomach, like, wow, behavior, that's a new term. We talk about it subjectively, but we've never really identified it. That's what we're going to do. Really, principles, that's what they give us, is a ideal behavior. So we got to discover what these are. So here I have, for leaders and managers, they're routinely in the workplace looking for opportunities to coach to a structured problem-solving methodology. There's an example of one. That's what I want to see. Now for managers, I want managers to share improvements and countermeasures to problems in other areas, to minimize reinventing the wheel. That's a behavior I want to see from my managers. Employees, I want them signaling problems and swarming to solve them, using a standard approach. I just want them signaling problems. I want them to signal and swarm and then solve. So that's what I want for my employees. So here, just brainstorm. Come up and identify, so ideally, what behavior do I want to see? Now, keep in mind, during the webinar, we only got so much time. We'd usually spend a lot more time in diving in on this. So let me give you kind of some quick key learning points that we've found when identifying behavioral objectives. Some things to avoid, some things to do, because most of you, when we talk about behavioral objectives, it gets really cloudy, it's gray. We've never done this before. We're really good at identifying performance objectives, but not behavior objectives. So let me point out some things as we do this. First one is, guys, this is a behavior, which means it's an action, which means you're going to need what? You're going to need a verb. And not just any verb, you're going to need an action verb. So as you describe this behavior, know that words like know, learn, understand, appreciate, those are really difficult to see. So when we talk about behavior, these are things that can be observed, described, recorded. Picture you have a video camera. Anything that video camera picks up, that's behavior. So when I use the words like, managers, they know, how to share ideas, across the organization. Well, how do I know that? Well, what would I see? So picture, capture these verbs. They're important. Also, put a role in there. So most people make the mistake of just putting a universal behavior and say, well, yeah, that's what we want everyone to do. Well, that's okay. You can have a few of those, but assign a role. Put leaders. I want my leaders to be doing this. I want my management to be doing this. I want my employees or my associates to be able to do this. So put a role in there. So as you go out there, you're going to see specifically, I can observe my management or I can observe my employees and they're doing this. Now the other one, so here's the common mistake, is that they'll take these verbs, and here I have a list of verbs, by the way, and we have a sheet of verbs. It's actually more of a crutch to most people because they get so fixated on the verbs, they don't realize there's other ones out there. But so here we have verbs, and you can throw those in there, and here I have, they're highlighted, like looking, share, signal. But the third one is the what. So what do I want my managers to share? What do I want my employees to signal? So you have to describe the what behind, that action. So it's employees signal what? Well, they signal problems. They swarm. They swarm to do what? They swarm to solve using a standard approach. So identify that what. And here's where most people get hung up. It's on this fourth one. Keep it simple. I find groups, after group, you can wordsmith these to death. Simple is complex. Take a step back and see, what ultimately do we want to see from our organization? What would be the most simple behavior? I mean, look at employees. Really, I want them to be able to signal problems and swarm to them and solve in a standard approach. And that would be a great behavior to see in my organization for my associates. So pick some good action verbs, and I would limit these to 1 to 3. Do not go down there, with these verbs and go, well, I want my people to share, define, clarify, verify, develop, mentor, apply. Because then when you get out there, you kind of look back, scratch your head and go, so what are we looking for? So keep those simple, those verbs. You should only have about 1 or 2 in there. Now, identify the role. As you look at this, I may even say, okay, leaders and managers are routinely in the workplace looking for opportunities to coach to a structured problem solving. I may want to modify that. I just don't want them looking for, I want them actually coaching. So I can even change that out and make that even a stronger behavior. Leaders and managers are in the workplace coaching opportunities to a structured problem-solving methodology. I just don't want them looking. I want them coaching. So you can see how you can start looking at these in very simplistic terms. But follow those 4 rules. Those will help you as you start identifying what these are. Now, here's an activity for you. As you do this, draw this grid out. This is what we call a TSP grid. Put 3 swim lanes in there: tools, systems, behavior. Now we're going to start linking and brainstorming some of these concepts. Before you start linking things, you got to see the big picture and what are all the parts. So put those behaviors up there. Now we have leaders, behavior, managers, associates. And notice I put it up in level 5. Now we're gonna assess this behavior on a scale, kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. The scale that we use at the Shingo Prize, it is a behavior scale. And if you go to the model and guidelines, you'll see this scale. It's a scale based on key components of behavior, like frequency, duration, intensity, scope. But what we're looking for is just not frequency, duration, intensity, scope. It's frequency, duration, intensity, scope of principle-based behavior. So when I'm looking back up here, and I'll take the employee one, for example. Employees signal problems and swarm to solve using a standard approach. Look at level 5. That's what I want to see. That's constant, uninterrupted, culturally ingrained, tenacious. It's enterprise-wide. Because I can actually take that behavior and bring it over to level 1. As I go out to these plants, I can see, well, no, that's more sporadic. They're just starting to do this. It's kind of apathetic. They may be able to signal problems, but they don't do much with them. They throw them over to the engineers, to focus on. It's very isolated. I only see this in operations. No one else is doing it, or maybe just this cell is doing it. So you can notice that you can take this behavior and you can throw it from both ranges. Ideally, I want to see this in level 5. I want to see that behavior at that kind of level. A specific role, leader, manager, associate in that behavior. It's HR, accounting, finance, everyone's firefighting. And role, leaders, managers, associates are all doing it. Does that make leaders, managers, associates? Now, how do we get people to start acting that way? If you break them up, there's a dichotomy. You'll fix about 85 gated. Business systems is where you flow. IT, education, training, highly integrated to accomplish an overall goal and objective. Those are the three key elements of a system. So let's take a look at one. So here I have, business system is operations. And inside that, here's my work system. It's milling, then welding, painting, assembly, inspection. If you're in healthcare, you go to the ED, you can see this flow easily too. You go in, you check in, and you're probably thinking the next step is waiting. That's not true. It's what you're doing in between. So after you check in, you go to triage. After triage, then you get diagnostics, and then after that, you get release. You have to check out. So you got to follow that pattern. So there's the work system there. Everyone has, their own work systems. Here's an example of improvement systems. So here we're talking about problem solving. Well, I want to see problem solving in all three or all those work systems. Problem solving, the system itself probably has some other subcomponents like visual management. And remember, a system is a collection of parts. So visual management has things like 5S, A3, 5S audit, red tag area. These are all just parts, highly integrated to accomplish a goal and objective. Now, let me throw in another one. There's management systems. So we know that problem solving, you can't just have visual management. You got to have education training. You got to have a communication system. And what's some of the tactical, the parts of that? Well, the communication system, be like huddles and SharePoint. Training, some of the tactical elements over there, skills and assessments. So these are all the parts that kind of link up, that are highly integrated into the systems, go back up to support that work system. This is what we're looking at. And this is also the danger, by the way, of benchmarking and going and copying other systems. I see a lot of organizations that go in and they go into great plans and they copy like the pull system. I see the pull system copied a lot. They come back, they apply it. I can tell you within a month, that thing, it'll fail because you haven't copied the rest of the systems or how it integrates. You're copying how it's done, but not why it's done, not the behavior behind it. The people understand these systems is a big part. Now, what's the goal and objective here? We don't just solve problems to solve problems. So here we have embrace scientific thinking. Really, why we problem solve is to embrace scientific thinking. And you can actually even ask a step further. Well, why do you embrace scientific thinking? What is the power of that? And this, again, it can be multiple. It's to allow no defects to pass on. It's to learn. It's to help create flow. Ultimately, to create value to the customer, which is actually the ultimate principle. Okay, so here's a quick quiz question. Is that a system? Look at that. And here we have lean. Everything's pointing back to lean. We think, well, yeah, it's a great lean system. Is that a system? And really what we discover is, no, it's a collection of tools. We don't just do lean for lean's sake. Well, what's the goal and objective? What's the behaviors that really matter? So when we anchor the principles, it kind of gives us a goal and objective. But this in itself is just a group of tools. So let's go back to that chart that we had and go to the system swim lane. We could take time, and just identify. So what are some of the key systems there that help us get that behavior? Problem solving, visual management, education, communication. These are some key systems. You can also use the model and guidelines. We have a list of, there's systems that we see in organizations and there if you need a jump start. But here we're just trying to identify what are those key systems. Not tools yet. We're going to get there. So let's keep moving around the circle. So here we talked about principles, the behavior. Now there's systems that help drive that behavior, and now the tools. This should be the one that we're all pretty comfortable with, familiar with. Tools, these are the point solutions. When we talk about a system, it's really all the parts to a system. It's the events, the meetings, the Kanban cards, the current state map, even a Kaizen event we consider tactical. So these are just the tools that are part of that system. So here's a quick, if you want to know if that tool is working or not, take it out. So here I have a picture of a cell. You see a lot of different tools going on. There's, safety shields. There's visual management and on light. You look at the floor tape. See the floor tape around the carts. It's interesting. What would happen if we took out the floor tape? And that floor tape is just a tool. Just a tool. That card is just a tool. What would happen if we took out that floor tape? and we put in a new person into the system, someone that has not been there for 30 years. Is that tool part of the system? You know, it's interesting. We've studied, you know, these cards, and we can't tell if they're male or female, but if you take out that tape, it controls breeding. Because the next thing we see is 2 cards there, then 3 cards, and we can't explain it. All we know is that that tool, that floor tape, controls that card from accelerating and bringing in more cards. So that tool really is part of that system. It controls a behavior. Think of something else. Let's go into healthcare. Let's say here we have an anesthesiologist tray on the left side. What would happen if we took out the right side, or the tools, you know, the visual controls? What would we see? So this kind of the quick test of a tool is pull it out and see what kind of behavior it drives. If it doesn't change the behavior, well, that tool may have just been another excess inventory tool, or it actually may change and shift the behavior. So now we know it's kind of part of that system. You can play with that, experiment with that. So as we go back, let's go back to our grid. Can we identify, so what are those tools that actually affect those systems? Can you identify those tools? And again, pull them out, see if it's still, so education training. Well, what if we took out our formal lean learning or understanding of PDCA cycle? Would we still get the education training that we needed? You know, probably think, well, yeah, we needed those in. Visual management, what would happen if we took out 5S? That's probably one that we'd need in there. So you can play with those and kind of reflect, putting those in and out. Now, this makes it easy to go back and say, okay, let's assess problem solving. Let's put a scale to it. Put a dial there. Put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where are we today? Could you decide that? Could you go back and look at the behavior and keep in mind we've identified that level 5 behavior, but that may not be where we are today. By the way, that's okay. That's not right or wrong. The key here is identify where we are with actual reality, not perceived reality. So could we identify? Yep. We'd probably tell you, problem solving, we have a system there, but we're not driving that strong behavior. I don't see my employees signaling and swarming constantly. It's not tenacious. So we know, maybe it's not a 4 or 5, but it may be a 3. But you can do this to every one of those systems and put this kind of dial on there and ask yourself, so what behavior is it driving? Now, back to, the purpose of this webinar is to see, so how do these connect? How do you start aligning these? And there's several, methods to do this. There's not one right way to see this, but there's a lot of ways to see the connection. This first one, what we just did was kind of a TSP grid. It was brainstorming. What behavior do I see at a level 5? What systems do we have in place that may drive that behavior? What tools connect with that? The power of this one is just a brainstorming exercise. Get your people together, start talking about the concepts. The next one, once you see this, you realize, oh, we're actually creating a structure here. If you look at the TSP grid, we're actually creating, for those with the Ishikawa diagram or a fishbone diagram, we're creating this cause and effect. And that cause and effect, the effect is the behavior that we see. The cause is the systems and the tools. And so what we immediately see is this relationship. So it's more than just a brainstorming exercise. We can actually start, fine-tuning this and finding the root cause. So with the fishbone, we know that we use the 5 whys. Of course, you got to be careful with 5 whys. It's one of the most dangerous tools out there. For anyone who's led a facilitation in this, you'll reflect on this because you get people going down the wrong rabbit holes. Everyone thinks it's leadership's fault and you don't have enough resources. Well, pull them out of those rabbit holes and let's do the 5 whys. So now you got to help them facilitate down. Well, the reason why we're getting this effect or this behavior is maybe because we can't help them identify what those systems or what those problems are. So maybe that's in our visual management. Well, what is it in our visual management? Why can't they help identify? Well, maybe we can't show them what a normal and an abnormal looks like. And so you start asking these questions, guess where you get down to? You get down to the tools. And that's really, it's another way to look at and link these together. Now there's another one that we call a TSP map. And this is actually just half a map. We're going to take the same concept. And again, we're aligning, we're linking these. So here up on the top left, for those who are really familiar with PDCA, you'll relate and reflect to this one. So principles, we have identified those on our Post-its. We have a principle of embrace scientific thinking, the ideal behavior. We have identified those. We've listed those. That's the plan. You know, when we think about this in the PDCA cycle, that's what we want to do. That's what we want to accomplish. Now, what's going to help us get there? And that's the systems. So systems are going to help us do. This would be like the visual management system, the training system, award and recognition system. So here's where we list all those systems. So where do we check? And we go up here, we can actually see, okay, so is that system really driving that behavior? We can still put a 1, a 2, a 3, 4, 5, you know, based on that scale. So maybe education training, well, we're really seeing that's really kind of a 1 or a 2. People don't understand the methodology. They can't identify, you know, what an error looks like or what an abnormal condition looks like. That may be something that we're doing in training. So we can assess really quickly or check, you know, how that system is doing to drive that principle. Now let me throw in a cautionary piece here. Not every system is geared to drive every behavior. And so sometimes we put a NA in here, or not applicable, in that little box up there on the check area. But be careful, because if you put NA, NA, NA all the way up, that means that system may not drive any of that behavior. Take it out. Not take out the system, but don't look at that system to drive that kind of behavior. You may need to look at another system. Where do you think we adjust then? Here we have the plan to do the check. Where do we adjust? And of course, you have process elimination. There's only one spot left. It's in the tools, the methods, the techniques. That's where we act. That's where we adjust. So we adjust the tools to drive the systems, or to enable a system to drive a behavior. Now here should be the light bulb that should be dimly lit. Where do we typically start our lean journey? It's usually in the tools. And we do the tools, and we try to integrate those in the systems, and we kind of scratch our heads and go, so how do we get this into our culture? We would approach this the other way. Identify the behavior, find the systems, or adjust the systems to enable that, check that, and then adjust the tool. This is how we would approach that. And it's another way of aligning or seeing how these connect. So here we have principles, the work systems, the tools. Now the one piece that we haven't looked at is results. So how would we look at results here? Now let me show you, let me kind of back up one. What I'm showing you is half a TSP map. It's the behavior side. Well, what would the other side look like? What would that do for us? So let's take a look. Let me kind of step through this one more time. In alignment, remember, we're trying to align principles, systems, and tools. Now when I say principles, I mean behavior, key behavior. So here I use the term KBI. That may be foreign to most. And what we just created in those Post-its was really a key behavior indicator. We're really good at key performance. You know, we come up with KPIs all the time. But what would be the KBI? So if we were to take our mission, our vision, our strategic philosophy, anchor principles, or describe those in terms of principles, we could come up with key behaviors. Now let's go assess. Let's go rank those, you know, 1 to 5. Okay, so here I can rank those behaviors, but where would I go see these kind of behaviors? Well, I'd go see them in the work systems. And that's where my predominant focus of these behaviors would be. It's where value is being created. It's in these work systems. So here I have work system 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what other systems do you think would integrate or interconnect with those work systems? So it's just not work systems. Remember, it's management systems and improvement systems. So here you can see some of the dimensions coming in from the Shingo model. It's CE is cultural enablers. So there's systems for cultural enablers: education, training, coaching, empowerment, involvement. There's CPI. There's continuous process improvement systems. These are improvement systems. There are enterprise alignment systems, you know, like strategy deployment, communication, and then we have results systems. So here we have those, linking those together. Now, if I were to take one like in our education training, we can actually drop that down and look at, so how do we educate and train? And look at the subsystems and the tools. So we have new hire orientation. We have lean training. We have on-the-job training. We have TWI. So we have a lot of systems and tools in there. So here I'm starting to link and see how these interconnect. but I haven't finished yet. Let's take a look at results. So on the far right now, I can look at my true north, my direction, the quality, the cost, delivery, productivity, safety. Now this is what everyone should be comfortable with. It's the KPIs, key performance indicators. We usually have a balanced scorecard. It kind of looks like, similar to that. And but now we're going to bolt it in, because what I want to see is how we link behavior to performance. And that's really the true power when we look at aligning principal systems tools. It's just not aligning principal systems and tools. It's aligning them to how we hit our performance. It's getting the right behavior with the right performance. We can hit those performance numbers and create workarounds, firefighting, heroic efforts, and we can get green. But what if we're doing that with the wrong behavior that we don't want, as leaders and managers? How can we even signal that? And so by linking these, we can start seeing, are we getting the right behavior with the right results? And here we can see this again. Remember those steps that we just walked through. Principal behavior, identify what we want to see. Step 2, what's the work systems? What are the support systems? 4, what tools enable those systems? 5, what results are we hitting because of those? And then 6 is the assess. And so now we can see how they start linking or aligning, just starting to kind of grasp those connections. That last one, that 6, that assess, what we're really assessing is the culture and how you hit those behaviors and how you get those results. So here's a quick, so how would you ever use this? This does not replace policy deployment, by the way. We look at policy deployment, and it is a system in itself. And most organizations could relate to this, where they look at their mission, their vision, their values. Their leaders go up on the retreats, sometimes to Hawaii. They talk about these, the big picture, and then they come back and they create this strategic management system, the strategy, the 5-year plan, the strategic map, and then they drop down and they create the balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard really is to help us understand what measures we want to cascade down to the daily business operations. This is a typical cycle of strategy deployment. And it gets, at the very end, it gets down to key performance indicators. Now, for those who are on this journey, you realize we can't just be focused on results. It's got to be more than that. And this is where we bring in, how do we keep that mission and vision and values in the forefront? How do we focus on both principles and results? Can we? Is it possible? Absolutely. So where the map kind of bolts in, where the TSP map bolts in is, so it doesn't replace strategy deployment, but it allows us to monitor and track the behavior that we want to hit and also the performance and how we hit it. So that's the true power of aligning and linking. And the more that you experiment and see, the more you see, that tools are not, you can't just use tools alone. They integrate into a bigger picture, a system. But you don't just have systems. Your systems need a goal and objective. Is to drive a behavior to get you the right performance. So this is kind of how we link these together. And again, there's lots of ways to do this, but at the end of the day, it's how you're hitting the right behavior and the right performance. Go out and experiment. It's a great concept to go look at. You can do this, in your office, in the plant, in your facility. So I'm going to leave it at that as kind of a starting point to ground you in alignment. And again, we teach more of this in a full day. This takes a lot more time than 30 minutes, but it gives you kind of a taste of aligning these concepts together. So we'll talk about these. In fact, we teach a course at the conference coming up, TSP mapping. How do you map this? And how do you link these to your own systems, your own tools? So we'll be doing that at the conference coming up as well. So I'm going to leave it for that for any questions that are out there.
Jake, can you hear me? Hang on. There we go. Jake, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about that. Well, first of all, thank you very much. Mr. Raymer is, as you can obviously all tell, is very experienced and it's just awesome to listen to. Jake, you're an excellent presenter, so thank you very much. Let me go through some of these questions here. I might slaughter some of these names, but Rui Coelho, he or she asks, on behavior slide, please expand develop people. I need to get my leadership team to know this means more than an annual development plan.
Yeah. You know, this actually take develop people to one step up. Take one step up, and what you'll realize is there's a principle behind this. It's respect every individual. This principle governs consequences. If you understand and respect every individual, you develop your people. If you respect people, you empower and involve them. If you respect people, you assure a safe environment. So developing people is one way that we show respect and provide the right resources, the right capabilities at the right time and place. Without this, it's very difficult to enable a culture. In fact, not difficult, it's impossible to enable a culture of continuous improvement. So you really got to, when we talk about developing people, here's where I'd give you some challenging points. Go define what behavior you want to see from your leaders, from management, and from associates. So from the manager's side, I want them coaching. I want them out there coaching these capabilities on a day-to-day basis. Leaders, the behavior I want to see from them, I want them to clarify and identify these are the core concepts that we want to see. I want them to provide resources. I want them to remove barriers. Remember, I'm using a verb and a what. The verb is remove. Barrier is the what. I want them to remove barriers for this. You know, they really need to create, and it's not just a learning organization. That's halfway through. You want to create a teaching organization. Every leader a teacher. Management should be teaching. Associates can teach as well, because once you start teaching, you actually gain 90% retention rate of the topic learned. So look at creating a teaching organization.
Okay. The next one, Patrick O'Connell asks, any tips on how to measure KPIs daily or weekly and weekly?
Good. Yeah, that's a great question. So once you have these KPIs, the TSP map just allows you to identify them and line them up. Now, what do you do with those behaviors? Take those behaviors and integrate those into your systems, such as award and recognition system. You know, one of the first systems that we have to go in and adjust is the award and recognition, because you're typically awarding and recognizing bad behavior. You're awarding and recognizing firefighting, workarounds, heroic efforts. So take those behaviors and ask yourself, okay, so how are we awarding and recognizing our people? Or how do I integrate that behavior into leadership standard work? So when my leadership go on a gimbal walk, they're going out there and they're looking for specific behaviors. Go to standard work. When you develop your standards on a daily basis, they're following these standards. Can you integrate those behaviors into your standard work? So what you find is that those behaviors, yeah, we just talked about them on a post-it, but how do you integrate those into your system? Like award and recognition, standard work, leadership. You can even put these in your communication, like huddles. So when you talk about your communication or your huddles, how do you talk about, you know, how do you look for these behaviors?
Excellent.
So, and I'm keeping short on these questions, not to get lengthy.
Sure, you bet. Mauricio Mayer asks, how do you recommend selling, quote unquote, this model to executive leadership?
Good. You know, executive leadership, they want, and I'm going to say this very coldly, they want one thing. They want the results. You know, I've worked with a lot of organizations. I won't use names, but when I went out to a plant, I got a call from corporate, and the first call was, Jake, don't mess with this plant. We don't mess with performance. I got to hit my performance. And what I shared with them is, you know what? We're not going to mess with performance. What we're going to mess with is the behavior and how you hit that performance. So the executive leadership, they want to see quality, cost, safety, delivery. They want to see those performance measures. What you managers should be wanting to see is, how do I get those? It's easier, by the way, if you can create a system to create consistent behavior to hit those results. And that's what you want to create. So the sell you make for executives and leadership is, we can get these results more consistently if we're focusing on the right behavior. if we focus on behavior, versus with cracking, versus, command and control. You can still drive a performance with command and control, but it takes a lot more energy to do that.
Awesome. Let's see. One question. Aaron Powell asks, will TSP mapping be taught during the 2-day workshop at the upcoming conference, in addition to the separate TSP mapping workshop?
We are teaching in fact, we've opened this to 2 courses. We've had I think we filled up the Monday. I think we're teaching, I want to say we're teaching, I know we're teaching 2 classes for the TSP mapping because the first one's already filled up. I know the second one's filling up as well. But so let me amplify this. We're doing this at the conference. For me personally, there's a downside to that because we get a lot of people that come to this conference. And so when they sit through the mapping process, you're going to hear a lot of people, talk about their different systems. We're going to line them and link them. We're actually going to create a TSP map. One of the best ways to learn this is, we can also do that workshop in your plant. This is actually one of the best ways to do it because we can come out to your plant and talk about actual systems. We can identify actual behavior, link those up to your strategic philosophy, and we walk away, with a map and how to start using that, how to implement that and integrate that into your systems. That's probably, ideal.
Okay. Mike Orzen asks, what are some of the common barriers to introducing these concepts at an organization?
And let me classify, it's really bad, let me classify leaders. There's 3 types of leaders. 1, leaders that just want results. Just give me the results. 2, type 2 leader are, they know that you just can't be driving the results. They need something else out there, but they don't know what that is quite yet. They know there's something different. They need to be focused on something different, but they don't know what that is. Type 3 leaders are, they have done tools, they've done systems, they know that they need to move beyond that. There's something beyond just focusing on tools to get the results. Those type of leaders are ready to move to the next level, what we call, kind of crossing this bridge. They've built that first pillar on tools. Now they got to get moved, they have to move to the next level. So some of the barriers that we see is first of all, it's just leaders. They want to just get results. It's really hard, if you can't make the connection, between the, behavior and results and your culture. So when leaders tell me, we want to shift culture, well, what is it that you're going to shift? Culture is behavior. So what you're shifting is behavior. Well, behavior to do what? And that behavior is to get the result. So when they talk about shifting the culture, it's really about shifting behavior to get the result. That's what we want to focus on. So that's how we kind of help eliminate some of those barriers is we really have the same mindset, the common goal.
Okay. Looks like we have time for maybe 2 more. Let's see. Well, one question that I'll answer quickly. Fidel Martinez asks, how can we get a copy of this presentation? As of Monday, this presentation will be up on the Shingo Exchange blog, www.shingoexchange.org. And then I think the last one we have, let's see. Blakemore John asked, where can we find resources on the TSP map?
We can say, there's several companies that are doing this already. And where most of them are going to be at? The conference. Most of them will be there. Billy Taylor from Goodyear, he'll be there. We have people from Daimler. They're going to be there. So these are some of the keynote speakers, and that's what they're going to be talking on is linking, principal systems and tools. They'll be talking about how do you lead this kind of organization. So how do you lead a principle-based organization and behavior? So that's one of the best places to start connecting with these people. When you go to these conferences, you'll realize this is not a tool-based conference. These are truly the sick and twisted. They're beyond the tools. They know that there's something out there, and it's something bigger and better than just focusing on results and tools. So it's a great way to connect with these organizations and practitioners that are doing this on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent. Just want to remind everyone, first of all, thank you again, Jake. That was excellent. I want to remind everybody to get signed up for conference, www.shingoprize.org/2012 conference, and we look forward to seeing you in Jacksonville.